Okay, you made it to Chapter 3, and this is all about Social Security taxes. And let's just hope that when you actually get around to collecting Social Security, that it's there to be paid out to you. This is Chapter 3, Learning Objective 1. Let's look at the coverage under FICA. FICA is the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. It originally came out in 1935. And it's a tax that's paid both by the employees and the employers. At this point, which is I'm doing this based on 2012 law. And by the time you watch this, it could be different. But the employer has to pay 6.2% OASDI plus, which is the Social Security, and 1.5%, which is the health insurance or Medicare. And the employee, usually the employee pays the same as the employer. It would be 6.2. But in 2012, in order to give taxpayers a break, they decreased it to 4.2% for the Social Security, but regardless, the Medicare is still there at 1.45. So when you are watching this, it may be in a year that this 4.2 is back up to 6.2. But for purposes of this chapter, I've got to use this 4.2%. SCCA stands for Self-Employment Contributions Act. This is for people that are self-employed. And basically, they're the employer and they're the employee, so they have to pay both taxes. So they would pay the employees and the employer's share of the Social Security, the OASDI, plus the employee and the employer's share of the Medicare. So it's 2.9%. So there's three issues here. First, are you an employee or an independent contractor? And is the service rendered considered employment? And is the compensation considered taxable? Here's a website that you can go to stay up on things because I don't know how soon after I make this you're watching this, but percentages and things most likely have shifted. So the big question, independent contractor versus employee. Because if you're an independent contractor, you're subject to the self-employment tax, and if you're an employee, it's FICA. So every person is an employer if the person employs one or more individuals for performance of services in the U.S. And for intents of this definition, person includes trust, estates, individual partnership, or corporation. So, we could say a corporation employs. There are certain occupations that are specifically covered by the FICA. Full-time life insurance salespersons, meaning they have to pay into the FICA plan. Agent and commission drivers of food and beverages or dry cleaning. Full-time traveling salespersons. Individuals working at home on products that the employer supplies them. They work on them and then return them according to furnished specifications. Whatever they were supposed to do to them, they do, and they send them back. They're covered by FICA, meaning their employee and employees have to pay into FICA. If an employer misclassifies an employee, meaning they're really they're really an independent contractor, or they're treating them as an independent contractor, but they're really an employee, there's a big penalty, and that's generally what happens. And the penalty is generally equal to the employer's share of the FICA, plus the income taxes and FICA that were not withheld from the employee's earnings because you were treating them as an independent contractor and not an employee. However, if the employee reported their earnings on their tax return, then the penalty is voided. And the penalty can be reduced if the employer filed a 1099. So certain government employees are exempt from Social Security depending on their date of hire. Impatriates, which would be people that are working in the United States from other countries. We've got agreements with over 20 foreign countries so that we don't, the people from their countries don't get taxed in ours and in the country they came from. That would be double taxation. Family employees, in certain situations, children might be exempt from the FICA. Household employees, okay, nannies, gardeners, chauffeurs, and if they make more than $1,800, if they make cash wages of $1,800 or more per year, then they are subject to FICA. And you have to pay FICA if the domestic employee is under your control. So there's some additional exemptions. Inmates, medical interns, student nurses, workers serving temporarily in case of emergencies, they don't have to pay FICA. So let's look at what is an independent contractor. All the characteristics are listed on page 3. Well, they're in your book. Depending on what edition you're looking at, it might be slightly different. If somebody's classified as an independent contractor, then whoever hires them to do some work doesn't have to pay FICA on them. And the independent contractor basically is liable for his or her own Social Security on net earnings. Now, I want to make a point here. There's been so much fraud around classification of employees and calling, they're really employees, but they're called independent contractors because the employer is trying to save on the FICA, on their share of the FICA, and federal and state unemployment taxes. I have a girlfriend who was married to a painter, and he supervised about 10 different painters. These are house painters. And he clearly was the employer. He did not meet the characteristics of an independent contractor. And he was treating his people as independent contractors, and he was not even giving them 1099s. So first mistake was he should have treated them as employees, and second one is he didn't issue them a 1099 even though he was considering them independent contractors. So when the IRS did an audit and found out about this, he was liable for all of the FICA taxes that should have been paid, and penalties also for not giving 1099s. And a lot of his workers didn't report any of the earnings, so that just made the penalties even worse. They ended up going bankrupt. They lost their house, and it was a pretty bad deal. So there's just been so much fraud in this area that the IRS is pretty strict about making sure that if you have employees, you have to treat them as such.